So today's hearing is on the U.S.'s competition with China, and I just want to spend some time this morning talking about the idea of great power competition. This is a phrase that's been thrown around a lot over the last 5 years. You know, someone must have thought that it was a clear articulation of the state of the world, but I'm concerned that it obscures more than it reveals. Understanding the notion of great power competition is important because military leaders come before this committee using it as their justification for even higher budgets. So let me just start with the basics. Can anyone tell me what this competition with China is over? For example, is it over resources, territory, sea control, military supremacy, economic dominance? Whose political economic system is the best, global leadership, something else, all of the above? Anybody?
Senator, I think it is all of the above, at least in the case of China, not so much Iran or even Russia, but in the case of China, it really is. They are thinking big. If you remember the meeting that the Chinese had in their first face-to-face high-level meeting with the Biden administration in Alaska, what the Chinese were making a case for was Chinese leadership of the world, and in a very explicitly anti-democratic model. In fact, they mocked American democracy in that meeting. They mocked the idea of universal values, which we've stood for, which we sacrificed for, and built in order to help preserve following World War II. China is trying to undermine all of that. So I do think it's all of the above, ma'am.
Well, okay, I hear you on all of the above, but what I'm hearing you saying is we're competing with them for advantage across a wide range of categories. And that makes it pretty easy to see how this great power competition can mean almost anything. But let's make this simple and say we're trying to maintain our status as the dominant power economically and militarily. The problem with the idea of great power competition is that I'm not sure it's much different from the way that policymakers and experts thought about our place atop the international system in the 1980s and the 1990s. You know, the notion of the US as a dominant power in a unipolar world, and that's what was used to justify the Reagan defense buildup. So the way I see it, great power competition looks like new packaging for an old concept. So, Mr. Pottinger, let me ask you, you've described the idea of great power competition as a series of qualifying dashes that we must run and win in order to qualify for the next dash. But no one knows when the race will end. So is it fair to say that you view our relationship with China as a sustained competition for the upper hand over the coming decades rather than a contest that would be decided, say, in the next few years?
Ma'am, I think that that there are areas where China has a window of opportunity to do grave damage to our influence over international institutions, do damage to our alliances, the things that keep us safe and prosperous. And so when I talk about the idea that we have to sprint, it's really on these areas where we've opened up vulnerabilities that really should be strengths. For example, our financial markets, our capital markets, which are the deepest and most liquid in the world. Right now, those are benefiting the expansion of China's empire. This is a dictatorship that's committing genocide and implementing a high-tech totalitarianism. We should not be doing that anymore, and I think that we need to sprint to rectify some of these areas where we've been playing to their advantage instead of our own. That will put us on a path to be able to have a stable, long-term competition where we don't have to live in quite as immediate fear of
okay, so I take it that was a long answer to saying yes, this is going to be a long arc competition here.
I think it will be.
I support investing in smart cutting edge technology for our military. because we can't keep building the world's best 20th century military for the 21st century. But too often in Congress, and in this committee in particular, the metric for whether we are making the US stronger and more competitive in the world gets reduced to the number of bombers, the number of submarines, the number of missiles we have compared with China. And whenever somebody points out the price tag, the Pentagon tells us it's justified because of great power competition. So, Dr. Medeiros, would you say that if we have any hope of competing over the next century, the United States needs an economy that is moving at full steam ahead for everyone and not just a tiny slice at the top?
Absolutely, Senator. I mean, the fundamental basis of American strength is not just our political system and our values, which obviously need some work, but also the United States economy. And the Chinese know that. They watch and track very carefully the health of our economy, and in particular, our technology sector. To answer your previous question, I agree with your assessment. This will be a broad spectrum, long-term competition with China. And I think that that means that the United States needs to invest more at home to ensure that we run faster and simply don't focus on slowing the other guy down. So the more we can invest in American jobs and American families, I support the administration's infrastructure initiatives, the more we create the basis for the United States to run faster in this broad spectrum, long-term competition. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. And I think it's important to emphasize that investing in our economy means more than boosting semiconductor production and throwing money at R&D. It also means broad-based investments in the American worker, like universal child care, canceling student loan debt, and providing a strong social safety net for everyone. Competing with an authoritarian, corrupt, repressive regime, we need to be the model of democracy, the model of anti-corruption, the model of freedom that the rest of the world wants to follow. You know, I'm not interested in slogans that just justify another $1 billion in weapons spending. I think we need to focus on strengthening the U.S. through investments in our democracy and in our whole economy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.